Пожалуйста, подскажите, как вы оцениваете президента Гарри Трумана?
Please, would you tell us your opinion on President Harry Truman? Thank you.
Гарри Труман.
Harry Truman. Well, you know, I'm not very fussed about American history and rather indifferent toward their presidents. This civilization is a relatively new one, though undoubtedly remarkable and well distinguished. Its cultural foundation is strictly European, though, but anyway.
Но Труман, конечно, фигура очень значительная.
Truman is indeed a most remarkable figure, and we really ought to have a long series of discussions about both him and his era. We are, I'd say, obligated to study it. This period isn't quite aesthetically pleasing in every respect, and yet we must study it because many things sprang to life in those days. As fate would have it, this rather average man, though a laborious and remarkably diligent one, and let's say jolly well suited to run the state, got a lucky break to see through that beastly, arduous and galvanizing period of our history. And since he had lived through the first half of the 20th century, including the years 1941 to 1946, which were of the vital importance to his country, the great onus of decisions had befallen him. Before we go any further, let's talk about his personality. Truman was, so to speak, irreproachably dull. He was so straight and dynamic and assiduous and all for the people sort of man. He was born in an ordinary family of hard-working farmers. He worked in many places and proved himself sedulous.
Он пошел служить, причем, если я не ошибаюсь, он даже его не брали служить по здоровью, он подделал диагноз.
At one point he joined the army, and if I'm not mistaken, he was initially turned away due to poor health, and yet he forged his medical diagnosis in order to serve his tour of duty, not to evade it, and join the colors he did. He went through the Great War as a battery commander and rose to the rank of colonel. If I remember correctly, you can check it. Something like that, an officer and a colonel. He was a lawyer and a county judge. Besides, he was appointed judge without holding a legal license. Truman was one of the two United States presidents, I think there were only two, without a degree in higher education. Yes, he never obtained this worthless scrap of paper. Truman was an epochal personality, the author of the famous Truman Doctrine, a man who brought about a drastic turning point in American history. He was an extremely educated and well-read person. He even founded a library of his own, named after him and where he was buried according to his will. That's it. He didn't have that silly scrap of waste paper. Billions have diplomas, and look at them, a bunch of imbeciles. So, Truman paid his dues and eventually became a senator. Then he began to fight corruption hammer and tongs. And upon my Sam, he did expose a whole reeking mountain of venal practices and mow it down. Well, I'm dashed. He's so positive, you know. I mean, just look at him. Look at pictures of him as a kid, as a youth, or a middle-aged man. He simply radiates positivity, decency, diligence, responsibility, and nobility of the Anglo-Saxon race. He's got a fine chisel face and this "my life for the nation, all for the greater good" sort of smile. He's like irksomely perfect, although at the same time, yeah, on occasion he could be sharp, even biting in his speeches. He did have his back answer quick enough. Still, the man was appallingly faultless. It so happened, though it would of course have been better had it never happened, that he was appointed vice president under that leftist Roosevelt. Although I personally despise this man, I recognize his strong individuality. After all, he ruled his country while chair-bound. And yet, as God and Darwin are witnesses, he wasn't the only one known for such willpower. Yes, Truman was center-left, but one must bear a few things in mind. First, he wasn't as lefty as Roosevelt, though he carried on his policies in certain respects. Anyway, that's how it was. Second, being center-left in America in the 30s and 40s isn't the same thing as being a left-wing today, especially center-left. Nowadays, the so-called liberals are miles away from being true liberals. Leftists are branded liberals and vice versa, and that's ridiculous. Today, leftists have gone completely tonto. Bona fide terrorists, that's who they are. Back in the day, the center-left simply wanted to do something for the people, saving them from poverty, providing them with medical care, health insurance and all that rot. Regarding civil rights for blacks, well, it was about giving them civil rights, not depriving the whites of them. Basic civil rights for blacks, you see, so their lives would become easier. Once upon a time, blacks weren't as bold-faced and lippy as they are now. No welfare, no mass attacks upon the whites. Of course, someone more intelligent and intellectual than First Water would have foreseen where all this hunky-dory humanistic enterprise would lead us. Still in all, Mr. Truman was goody-goody overall, a man of wide reading, decent, efficacious and patriotic, a straight-arrow little saint, not a big-brain intellectual, no, but a gifted man for sure. His analytical powers were also in place, and he certainly could have pierced the veil of the future 10 or 20 years ahead. However, what would come 50 or 100 years later was shrouded from him, unfortunately. Nonetheless, there wasn't the slightest difficulty for him in dissecting something trivial. The decisions he made were worthy of a great politician. It is remarkable that he, well, as president of a great country, he's obliged to bear the weight of difficult choices. And so we come to the moment when he decided to end the war with Japan swiftly, in one fell swoop, by dropping bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He, Truman, made this choice. In the same manner, he carried on a defensive campaign to save South Korea from North Korea. It was thanks to him that this Bolshevist nightmare was averted and the red savages fell back. The Truman Doctrine, which marked a historic sidestep from the Monroe Doctrine, was a brainchild of his. To announce such a doctrine meant facing stark choices. Of course, from an emotional point of view, Hiroshima and Nagasaki were far graver, and yet he faced the music and made an absolutely right choice. Not only was it strategically and tactically justified, but humanistically as well. Tens of thousands perished, yet millions were saved.
Десятки тысяч людей, а миллионы людей. Да? Вот это надо очень хорошо понять. И он бы
This is a crucial aspect to consider. Otherwise, many Americans and Japanese would have died. But he saved them, both Americans and Japanese. It led Japan to become a democratic country, not a militaristic one, and to make great progress in many ways. The point is, sometimes leaders and their nations might go off the rails. On such occasions, only a nice kick in the butt can straighten them out. And Truman administered such a kick. What gives great credit to Truman's intelligence, though, is his realization that Stalinism and Bolshevism, the red menace of the Soviet regime, had to be confronted and vanquished. This venom was spreading like metastasis across the whole world, beyond the pale of Europe. He showed himself to be hard-boiled and true to life in recognizing this catastrophic danger, for this barbaric regime posed a threat to civilization. In this regard, Truman validated his innumerable skills and took the bull by the horns.
Вот здесь Труман, конечно, был совершенно прав и блистателен, и, так сказать, предпринял множество важных шагов. И здесь и спасение, кстати говоря, establishment
Besides, herein lay the salvation of the American establishment. It gave rise to McCarthyism, demonized by leftists and yet so vital. Europe, left-inclined as it was saved by the introduction of the Marshall Plan, planned and designed by United States Secretary of State George Marshall. Had it not been introduced, the Bolshevist plague could have dug deeper into Central and Western Europe and spread beyond.
Большевистская зараза могла бы, так сказать, усилиться в Европе и Центральной, и Западной, ну и так далее. То есть Труман в этом смысле, конечно, принимал...
That said, Truman conducted a series of viable, expeditious and life-saving measures. Sure enough, this drove his approval rating to rock bottom, because, as we know, voters are mostly fools. The war he launched in Korea in order to safeguard the world's peace and civilization did indeed ruin his polling. Nothing is here to wail or knock the breast. Be that as it may, Truman remains an exceptional and upstanding historical figure.
Но так или иначе, Труман, конечно, очень интересная и достойная фигура, но вот даже он слишком такой...
You see, he was as blameless as a lily flower, laborious and far, far away from earthly pleasures, just like his wife. The First Lady always stood by his side, and, if I'm not mistaken, Mrs. Truman held only one press conference in her entire life. Can you imagine it? She was modest and never sought self-advertisement. Like her husband, she worked hard, conducted herself with dignity, and was rather attractive.
Так что это, конечно, очень интересный персонаж.
All in all, he was quite a remarkable character, not necessarily flamboyant, but fascinating in his own way. My heart has always belonged to those more dashing and red-hot, controversial even. And Harry Truman is so diligent and flawless, impeccably dedicated to his country and his people. Just to spice things up a bit, he was a Freemason. And who wasn't, I ask you? Many people of his time were associated with Freemasonry. Anyhow, Masons of the 20th century were rather like a literary club.
Примерно так, если о Трумане.